Hello and welcome to Basic Arithmetic Without a Calculator. I'm Elizabeth Johnson and this is Lesson 5E, Multiplication and Division of Fractions and Mixed Numerals. Let me start out by telling you that you're in luck because multiplying and dividing with fractions is so much easier than adding and subtracting. You don't have to worry about common denominators anymore. What you see is what you get. You simply multiply the top, multiply the bottom. 1 times 1 is 1, and 3 times 4 is 12. And that's how you multiply a fraction. Let's have a look at some other examples. Here we've got 1/2 times 1/5. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 5 is 10. How about this one? 2 times 1 is 2. And 3 times 4 is 12. Now, there is something more I can do here because this fraction can be simplified. Both the top and bottom numbers can be evenly divided by 2. So I'm going to do that. 2 divided by 2 equals 1, and 12 divided by 2 equals 6. So there's that same answer in its simplified form, which is always the way we should answer them. Now let's look at the next one. 3 times 1 equals 3. And 8 times 2 equals 16. And now we have a different sort of problem because we've got a whole number and a fraction. Now remember, you can't really multiply whole numbers and fractions. You have to turn them both into the same thing. So either they'll both be whole numbers or they'll both be fractions. Now remember, the 1/10 represents a whole number that has been broken into small pieces. So we're not going to be able to put that back into a whole number. What we can do is we can turn this whole number into a fraction. And we can do it so easily by simply putting it on top of the number 1. There you go. Any number, if it's put on top of a 1, becomes instant fraction. We're going to multiply it times 1/10, so I'll just write that out again. Now you've got 5 times 1, which equals 5. You've got 1 times 10, which equals 10. Now you've got a fraction that needs to be simplified because both the top and the bottom of this fraction can be evenly divided by 5. 5 goes into 5 one time, 5 goes into 10 two times. So our answer is 1/2. And that's all it is. To multiply fractions is so much easier than to add or subtract them. Now let's talk about how to divide fractions. When you're going to divide fractions, there are two steps. You invert and multiply. What does that mean? Well, to put it another way, we turn the second fraction upside down and we turn the division sign into a times sign. So here's what it's going to look like. I'm going to rewrite this fraction. It will be 1/3. This didn't change. What did change was this division symbol turned into a multiplication symbol. And the second fraction turned upside down. Never the first one, always the second one. Now I can multiply. 1 times 4 is 4. 3 times 1 is 3. So the answer is 4/3, but this is obviously an improper fraction because the top number is larger than the smaller number, than the bottom number. So we're going to divide the bottom number up into the top number. And how many 3's are there in 4? There's 1, with 1 remaining. Remember, that 1 becomes our numerator of our new fraction. And the denominator, it just stays the same. So the answer is 1 and 1/3. Let's have a look at a few more examples. 1/4 divided by 1/5. We'll rewrite it. 1/4. Now remember, we're going to invert and multiply. So the division is no longer division, it's multiplication now. And 1/5 is no longer 1/5. It's 5/1. 1 times 5 is 5. 4 times 1 is 4. And again, we have an improper fraction. 4 is smaller than 5, so we need to divide the 4 into the 5. How many 4s are in 5? 1, with 1 remaining. And our denominator just stays the same. It's 4. So the answer is 1 and 1/4. Next example is 3/5 divided by 2/7. Invert and multiply. The first fraction stays the same, 3/5. But this symbol changes from division into multiplication, and this fraction turns upside down. Instead of 2/7, it is now 7/2. And I can do the maths now. 3 times 7, that's 21. And 5 times 2 is 10. We have another improper fraction. We'll be seeing a lot of that when we do multiplication and division of fractions. Let's go ahead and fix it up. How many 10s are in 21? There are 2, with the remainder of 1. And the denominator, it stays the same. It's 10. So here's your answer, 2 and 1/10. Next example, 3/4 divided by 2/5. We'll rewrite the problem with multiplication instead of division, and we'll turn the second fraction upside down, 5/2. Now let's multiply. 3 times 5 is 15. 4 times 2 is 8. Again, improper fraction. Let's fix it. How many 8s are there in 15? Well, there's 1, with a remainder of 7. And as for the denominator, it doesn't change. It just stays 8. So we've got 1 and 7/8. Now with this problem, we've got a whole number again. And remember, anytime you want to turn a whole number into a fraction, just put it on top of a 1. That's exactly what we're going to have to do here, because you can't divide whole numbers and fractions. You have to turn them both into the same thing. So you've got 3/1. The division sign changes into multiplication, and the 1/4 becomes 4/1. Now I can multiply. 3 times 4 equals 12. And 1 times 1 equals 1. And again, it's an improper fraction. So dividing the 1 into 12, I find that the answer is 12. Simply 12. There's no remaining, so there's no fraction. The answer is a whole number. Now for this one, 5/7 divided by 5. What do I do now? I'm dividing it by a whole number. Well, again, I'm going to turn that 5 into a fraction by putting it on top of a 1. So now I've got 5/7, and the division sign still changes into multiplication, and I've got 5/1. I'm going to invert it and turn it into 1/5. And now I can multiply. 5 times 1 is 5. 7 times 5 is 35. We're not quite finished yet because looking at the top and the bottom, I can see they both end in 5. And any number that ends in 5 or 0 can be divided by 5. So let's divide both the top and the bottom of this fraction by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 35 divided by 5 is 7. So the answer is 1/7. Now for something completely different. We've got mixed numerals and a fraction. So what do we do? Well, we should know by now that you can't divide mixed numerals and fractions. They both have to turn into the same thing. And well, it's easy enough to turn this mixed numeral into a fraction. And these are the steps to take. First of all, you multiply the denominator times the whole number. 4 times 2 equals 8. Next, you're going to add the numerator into that product. 8 plus 1 is 9. So 9 becomes your new numerator. And 4, that denominator stays the same. So now we've turned 2 1/4 into 9/4. And so that first part is finished. The second part is to turn the division into multiplication, and the third part is to turn the 5/8 into 8/5. And then we can do our multiplication. 9 times 8 equals 72. And 4 times 5 equals 20. Well, this fraction, it's got two things wrong. First of all, it's an improper fraction, so let's sort that out. How many 20s go into 72? Well, I know that 3 20s go into 60, and that leaves a remainder of 12 over 20. Okay, now I can see that both of these are even numbers in the fraction, so I'm going to have to simplify it. Remember, I don't have to simplify the whole number. It stays the same. We're just going to simplify this fraction. We're going to divide them both. Now, I know I can divide it by 2, but I can see an even bigger number that I can divide it by, and that number is 4. If I divide 12 by 4, I get 3. If I divide 20 by 4, I get 5. So the answer is 3 3/5. And that's how you multiply and divide fractions and mixed numerals and whole numbers. So have a go at your sample problems, and I'll see you back again in the next video.